I began writing music when I was 15, and with my first piece being a dedication to my secondary school concert band. Looking back, was pretty ambitious of me to even think about writing music for such a large ensemble like a wind band, let alone without any proper professional training. But I think it was because of this first big dream that I was open to the world of music composition. So when I started JC, I took a leap of faith and I decided to study H2 music, even though I dropped the music or MEP when I was in secondary 2. And I would say that that was what gave me a solid foundation in music education and my clarinet playing, where I learned clarinet under Ralph Emmanuel Lim for 2 years. And I was also very fortunate that in 2020 I was fortunate enough to participate in YST's Young Composers Academy, where I wrote and premiered my very first piece called Me Growing Up, featuring my parents in two movements. And I worked with a really amazing flautist, Carolyn Rouser, with that. And for me, that was a very important, life-changing moment for me, where I realized that I could actually make writing music a professional career for myself, and something that I would really want to consider pursuing in the future. And as for pursuing my dreams and aspirations, I would say that I really want to contribute back to the local music scene here in Singapore, because growing up I've seen so many mentor figures in my life who were just in my life for just a very brief moment in time, and yet like the connections and the impact that they had on me really impacted and changed and basically morphed me into who I am today. And so that's what I really want to do and to carry on in the future, where I want to carry that torch of inspiration for the next generation and keep the passion for music learning in the future. And also, I guess related to my upbringing, I feel that eventually it's going to be inevitable that I will return to my roots of being in a wind band and just working with that medium here within in Singapore, because as many young musicians my age, and I guess younger than me as well, it's such a humbling experience and humbling place to start off as a musician. And yet it's because of that humbling experience that I met so many different people. I've met went to so many festivals and so many experiences. And yeah, it's basically the wind band medium itself is essential to my identity, and so I feel like that it only makes sense that I would pay it back sometime in the future in my professional career. So when I began writing the piece You By The Merlion, I was really looking around for what material I could work with outside of music, and I found this poem by the Singaporean poet Edwin Thumboo called Ulysses by the Merlion, where it was basically telling the story of the Greek hero visiting Singapore in the 70s and basically marveling at our culture, and also how the Merlion was a symbol of not just Singapore but also Singaporeans as a people. And so what I found really interesting after doing more research into that was that that poem was basically the foundational poem which inspired decades worth of Malayan poetry in Singapore. And many of these poems were in response to Thumboo's original poem, and all these poems are chronicled in this anthology of poems called Reflecting on the Merlion, an anthology of poems which I had to go to the library and find, because there wasn't an online copy for me to just peruse. So when I found this poem, I found this anthology. It was like 40 or so poems, and I read through it. It was just such an amazing read, because it really showcased a bunch of variety of emotions and viewpoints, how people look at the Merlion, how they see the Merlion, what does that say about being Singaporean, and how one feels about being Singaporean. And there were a bunch of research papers that I looked into that also analyzed these poems and also analyzed the Malayan poetry in general, just to really take a look at what kind of emotions that people and the poets were really trying to portray in this anthology. And I was also really analyzing myself and my own relationship to Singapore and what it means to be a Singaporean myself. And so really the compositional process for me was really trying to understand what these emotions were, and what I sort of narrowed it down in my own piece was that it sort of primarily boiled down into four primary emotions, being critique, ambivalence and uncertainty, self-reflection and reinvention, and then finally acceptance. And all these would sort of be one individual section within the music. And then from there I filtered out some poems or some lines of poetry that I felt really inspired by, and just basically try and find a way to do word painting based on these lines. And many of these lines that I shortlisted were just so good. I went for like probably something like 40 lines of really really long excerpts or stanzas that I really wanted to find a way to use, and I had to cut it down to like 20 something snippets that only ended up being in the final piece. And so the music itself just sort of surrounded this material of text, where I tried to do word painting and I tried to create motifs based on these text. And a lot of these motifs are actually just directly related to the bits of the text and the emotions that are surrounding it. And another thing that before I even wrote a single note, was that I asked WeirdAftertaste if they had any Singaporean inspired objects they would want to include in the piece itself. And Michelina Chan on saxophone, she very very helpfully suggested NTUC plastic bags and red water buckets, which that I incorporated as sort of percussive elements into the piece, and some sort of percussive effects. And to me, I feel like that was what made the piece just a little more Singaporean, where you include all these little additional little things that sort of make You By The Merlion just a little more Singaporean, and a lot more personal to me. So You By The Merlion was the first time I actually worked with electronics and Ableton, and I primarily used the electronics as triggering the lines of narration for the poetry, because I really wanted to include live narration of the lines itself by the poetry, and I figured that using electronics to narrate it would serve as sort of like a juxtaposition of live performance with electronic recording. So I felt that was very interesting to see that juxtaposition between live and sort of artificial at the same time. But because it was being the first time I used Ableton, it was really really scary. I really didn't know if what I was doing was correct, but thankfully Bertram Wee from WeirdAftertaste, great pianist, great keyboardist, and great electronic musician, he helped me out every step of the way, and he gave me a bunch of advice on what to do with Ableton, how to work with the loops and what narrative bits. So big thanks to Bertram for like helping me out with all that. And I think another reason why I really wanted to work with electronics was that aside from triggering the narration and the looping lines, was that I also wanted to include a sense of artificiality with the sounds that the keyboard could make. And so Ableton gave me a lot of avenues to explore that with synths, and also all the different sounds and parameters that you could alter using the knobs and whatnot. And honestly, it's kind of terrifying to think about it. It's like, because it's like sort of handed like a dictionary to a baby, where you have all these ideas, all these wild possibilities, and you give it to someone who's super inexperienced. And I'm just here like, wow, this is crazy. I'm just fiddling with everything, and I don't know what is it that I actually truly want. And I guess that's what made it so fun, because all these new ideas and effects, I was just exploring of it in real time, and I just didn't have to notate them like as I usually have to do with my notation software. So things that like loops and randomization, it sometimes would have a huge change in how it sounded. Sometimes it was just very subtle effects. And so like one of these subtle effects that did end up in my final composition was this so-called shaking effect in the synth that was controlled by an expression pedal. And it was like a very subtle pulsating effect that sort of added a bit of instability in some sections of the music. And honestly, if like I got a chance to do it all over again, I feel like I really would have doubled down on all the electronics and really lean into all these electronic effects and all this parameter tweaking and whatnot, because they were just that much fun to explore and experiment with, just alone outside of the composition. So, and I remember playing with my Akai MIDI keyboard, just playing around with the knobs for hours on end, and just like I was just a huge fan of just playing with it. And so that what made me realize was that I've been missing out on so many of these nuanced things in like electronic music. And honestly, I'm just really amazed and a bit terrified of the potential that I could explore that in the future. So as of the moment right now, I'm just currently enjoying the rest of my holiday break before I begin the second semester of my first year at YST. And so while I don't really have anything concrete that's lined up for 2025 yet, I'm looking forward to many opportunities in the coming year, to attend composing festivals, band festivals, writing and premiering new pieces, and just playing and also attending and watching a bunch of concerts, and just overall trying to learn as much as I can, from my mentors and my friends. So it's gonna be a great year ahead, I'm sure. And yeah, it's just a lot to learn, and I hope that next year will be as fruitful, if not more fruitful, than 2024.